Marry me. Annie here. There's an Arabian proverb that goes, the fruit of silence is tranquility. I know this because once a very long time ago, I showed up for my weekly meeting with my teacher and mentor, my priest at the time. It was actually a big deal to show up as it was a 2-hour drive from my house. I drove the 2 hours expecting to be with him and with my working partner for our study time, which usually ran about 4 hours. We settled down with our teacher to begin. Our teacher handed us a piece of paper with that proverb on it. The fruit of silence is tranquility. And then he showed us the door. When we tried to speak, he put his fingers to his lips and motioned for us to leave. During the 2-hour drive home, I alternated between anger and confusion, I'll admit. We'd already spent a lot of time on the concept of stillness, quiet, and darkness, for it was the season of Samhain. I was puzzled as it seemed that there was some great meaning to the proverb, but it seemed more along the same lines to me. It felt like the practice of suspension that I mentioned in my last vlog. More of the same. Stillness, quiet, and darkness. In the next week, before we were to meet up with our teacher, my working partner and I burned up the phone lines in consideration of what that mystical proverb might mean. It was obviously something huge, as our teacher had made such a dramatic presentation of it, then shooing us out of his house. That was an expensive week for Tyrone and I, as it was in the days of long-distance phone call fees, and we didn't live in the same state. I still remember when that phone bill arrived the next month. He and I got so frustrated that midweek we met halfway between our houses to brainstorm the proverb together. The fruit of silence is tranquility. I'll have to look down my notes for that one, that's for sure. We had an aha moment centering on the proverb saying that tranquility is the fruit of silence. What comes from it? Perhaps then it was the essence of silence that we take with us after, for example, meditation or rituals or times set aside for quiet. If then a small piece of that stayed with us, our lives would not just be changed in the moment, but in a larger way. So just as meditation in the morning makes for a calmer day, the experience of silence in the season of Samhain would make an extension of that through the rest of the wheel of the year. The fruit of silence is tranquility. We had a second aha moment going through all of our books. Alas, that was the days when there weren't any computers. And coming upon a Zen Buddhist declaration that it is a fallacy to think that tranquility means nothingness or emptiness. That it is instead focusing on one thing, a thing we determine is most important in the moment, to the exclusion of other things. A kind of calm focus, ignoring the noise of surrounding life. An intention, if you want to put it that way. Hours later, we were still relating to tranquility as the result of silence. What's carried from it and what echoes in our lives from it. They were the combination of our aha moments and also a kind of calm focus that was the result of silence. Nervously, that next Saturday, we told our teacher how we interpreted the quote, and we waited for him to tell us if we were right. I think maybe we were quite worried that he was going to tell us we were nowhere near right. He didn't. He pronounced we would move on to the next lesson. We needed tranquility in that moment, believe me. And then we looked at each other, and I could tell in the way we smiled at each other, we just let's let it go. Let's let it go. And we did. We let it go. We probably experienced the fruit of silence as tranquility. Years later, many years later, I came upon an article that described Benjamin Franklin's 13 virtues. Tranquility was one of them. He wrote, describing tranquility, "Be not disturbed at trifles or at accidents common or unavoidable." I added that to my personal considerations of the proverb, that whatever echoes from our time in silence, quiet, suspension, or any form of healthy withdrawal and darkness brings perspective to the more active times in our lives. It's the living sense of balance that is the result of the times of silence, the intentional practice of balance. The sense as emotions begin to rise in us that we're about to overreact or react to something over which we have no control. The drama queen moments in our lives. This then took me to times of anger and acting out in some way that were especially part of my younger years. I was one fiery young woman who tended to be right about everything. And I was a bit quick to anger. Tranquility was a bit alien to me. Strangely, it was a children's story many years later that I found when I was looking for a reading, when I was doing some preaching at Sunday service at my UU church. It was a story that was about the balancing of anger. It hit me like a ton of bricks, and I could flash back to this fruit of silence is tranquility. It hit me like a ton of bricks, like I said, or perhaps I should say a ton of nails, because the story is called A Bag of Nails. Some of you may know it. I found a version of it online to share with you. Unfortunately, there's never any reference to the source of it. Here's the story. Keep in mind, this is about the fruit of silence is tranquility. And the power of coming from that place that we experience deeply at this time of year, and any time we choose to go inward, which creates a moment, a pause for us to think. It's the nurturing of tranquility that lies within us. The story goes, once upon a time, there was a little boy who had a bad temper. His father gave him a bag of nails and told him every time he lost his temper, he should hammer a nail in the fence. On the first day, the boy had driven 37 nails into the fence. But gradually, the number of daily nails dwindled down. He discovered it was easier to hold his temper than to drive those nails into the fence. When I first read this story, that to me went, that's the fruit of silence, tranquility. Finally, the day came when the boy didn't lose his temper at all. He proudly told his father about it, and the father suggested that the boy now pull out one nail for each day that he was able to hold his temper going forward. The days passed, and the young boy was finally able to tell his father that all the nails were gone. The father then took his son by the hand and led him to the fence. And he said, "You've done well, my son, but look at the holes in the fence. The fence will never be the same. When you say things in anger, they leave a scar, just like this one. You can put a knife in a man and draw it out. It won't matter how many times you say, 'I'm sorry,' the wound is still there." Added to my sense of what tranquility might be was the image of a fence with only the nail holes necessary in it to hold it up. Honestly, if I find myself to this day overreacting or in any way roaring because of an imagined thorn in my paw, well, that's another story altogether. Let's just say letting the smallest of things cause me to erupt. I imagine a fence. I might be the only person who can calm theirself by the image of a fence. But that fence, when I read that story to those children, and it didn't hit me, I think, until I was in the middle of reading this story, now that I think back. If we don't go into our quiet place, if we don't soak up what the season offers, what the night offers, what the moon offers in the darkness, we don't have a place from which our outer tranquility will come. We don't have that pause before we consider what we do or what we say. And just like in the story, we've totally destroyed any sense of tranquility once we put out something that's not aligned to it because we can't take it back. How do you handle the moments when you just have to spout, roar, and hiss at things that really aren't worthy of that kind of drama? One of the lessons of the season of Samhain is that we have an inner well of silence that can be a wellspring of who we are in the world. We bring the inner outward, and we explore the fruit of that silence, and we might name it tranquility. And back to Ben Franklin's 13 virtues. He came up with them because he wanted to overcome his tendency to overreact. He was only 20 when he wrote him. They're actually a rather interesting read. Ben would more than likely have understood the proverb. Again, to remind you, the fruit of silence is tranquility. I wish you mirth and reverence in the season of Samhain. Merry part.